Question 1. To address the challenge of investigating a credible but anonymous tip regarding potential extremist activity by a resident in Springfield, Illinois, which of the following investigative approaches would best align with HSI's operational guidelines and constitutional mandates? Option A. Immediately initiate a full-scale surveillance operation on the individual's residence and known associates. Option B. Conduct a warrantless search of the individual's residence based on the tip. Option C. Conduct a preliminary inquiry to discreetly seek corroborating evidence from publicly available sources and consensual encounters before considering more intrusive measures. Option D. Disregard the tip entirely due to its anonymous nature and lack of immediate, verifiable evidence. Correct answer is C. Conduct a preliminary inquiry to discreetly seek corroborating evidence from publicly available sources and consensual encounters before considering more intrusive measures. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the need for swift intelligence gathering to prevent potential threats and the imperative to uphold individual rights and due process. HSI special agents operate within a strict legal framework that balances national security interests with civil liberties. Misjudging the appropriate investigative steps can lead to the compromise of an investigation, the violation of constitutional rights, and severe legal repercussions for the agent and the agency. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all actions are legally sound, ethically defensible, and strategically effective. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves initiating a preliminary inquiry based on credible, albeit uncorroborated, information. This approach prioritizes gathering additional, verifiable facts through legal and authorized means before escalating to more intrusive investigative techniques. Specifically, it involves discreetly seeking corroborating evidence from existing, publicly available sources or through consensual encounters without infringing upon the individual's privacy or rights. This aligns with the principles of probable cause and reasonable suspicion, which are foundational to lawful investigative actions under the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution and HSI's operational guidelines. Such a measured approach ensures that any subsequent actions, such as surveillance or interviews, are predicated on a stronger, legally justifiable basis, thereby protecting the integrity of the investigation and respecting individual liberties. Correct approach is analysis. Initiating a full-blown surveillance operation immediately based solely on an anonymous tip, without any preliminary corroboration, is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach presumes guilt and bypasses the requirement for a reasonable suspicion or probable cause to justify such intrusive measures. It risks violating the individual's Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable searches and seizures, potentially leading to the suppression of any evidence obtained and disciplinary action against the agent. Conducting a warrantless search of the individual's residence based on the anonymous tip is a clear violation of constitutional law. The Fourth Amendment requires a warrant based on probable cause for searches of private residences. Such an action constitutes an illegal search and seizure, rendering any evidence inadmissible and exposing the agent to severe legal and professional consequences. Ignoring the information entirely due to its anonymous nature, without any attempt at preliminary verification, could also be professionally problematic. While anonymous tips require careful handling, completely disregarding potentially vital intelligence without any effort to assess its credibility or seek corroboration might hinder the agency's ability to prevent threats, especially if the information later proves to be accurate and actionable. This could be seen as a failure to exercise due diligence in protecting national security. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a tiered approach to intelligence assessment and investigative action. This begins with evaluating the source and nature of the information. Anonymous tips, while requiring caution, should not be dismissed outright but should trigger a process of preliminary inquiry. This inquiry should focus on legally permissible methods to corroborate the information, such as reviewing open-source intelligence, checking databases for relevant information, or conducting discrete, non-intrusive observations. Only when sufficient corroboration is obtained to establish reasonable suspicion or probable cause should more intrusive investigative techniques be considered, always in strict adherence to legal statutes, departmental policies, and constitutional protections. This systematic process ensures that investigations are both effective and lawful. Question 2. Examination of the data shows that a confidential informant, with a history of providing actionable intelligence in past HSI investigations in New York, has provided information regarding a suspected drug trafficking operation operating out of a specific warehouse in Brooklyn. The informant claims to have personally observed large quantities of cocaine being stored and prepared for distribution within the warehouse over the past week. The informant is seeking a reduction in their own pending federal charges in exchange for this information. What is the most appropriate course of action for the HSI special agent to take? Option A. Independently verify the informant's information through surveillance and other investigative techniques before taking any action, while meticulously documenting all interactions and ensuring proper evidence handling protocols are followed if any physical evidence is obtained. Option B. Instruct the informant to retrieve a sample of the suspected cocaine from the warehouse and deliver it to the agent for immediate analysis. Option C. Prepare a search warrant application for the warehouse based exclusively on the informant's statement, without seeking any independent corroboration. Option D. Immediately initiate a raid on the warehouse based solely on the informant's tip, given the alleged presence of a large quantity of illegal drugs. The correct answer is A. Independently verify the informant's information through surveillance and other investigative techniques before taking any action, while meticulously documenting all interactions and ensuring proper evidence handling protocols are followed if any physical evidence is obtained. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an HSI special agent to balance the immediate need for information with the strict legal and ethical boundaries governing evidence collection and informant management. The agent must navigate the complexities of informant reliability, potential entrapment, and the chain of custody for any information or evidence obtained, all while adhering to HSI policies and federal law. Failure to do so could compromise the investigation, lead to inadmissible evidence, and expose the agency to legal repercussions. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves meticulously documenting all interactions with the informant, including the nature of the information provided and the circumstances under which it was obtained. This includes verifying the informant's information through independent means before taking any action based upon it, and ensuring that any physical evidence is collected and handled in a manner that preserves its integrity and admissibility in court. This approach aligns with HSI's investigative guidelines and federal rules of evidence, which mandate that all evidence be obtained legally and that informant reliability be assessed and documented. Specifically, it upholds the principles of due process and prevents the introduction of tainted evidence. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately act on the informant's tip without independent verification, especially if the tip suggests an imminent threat or a high-value target. This bypasses crucial steps in assessing informant reliability and could lead to a premature or misguided operation, potentially resulting in the apprehension of innocent individuals or the escape of the actual perpetrators. It also risks creating a situation that could be construed as entrapment if the informant's actions are too persuasive. Another incorrect approach is to solely rely on the informant's word regarding the location and nature of contraband, and then instruct the informant to retrieve it themselves for delivery. This creates a significant gap in the chain of custody and raises serious questions about the evidence's integrity and whether it was tampered with. It also places the informant in a position of direct evidence handling, which is contrary to best practices for maintaining objectivity and legal admissibility. A third incorrect approach is to disregard the informant's potential for bias or personal gain and to use their information as the sole basis for a search warrant without corroboration. Informants may have ulterior motives, such as seeking leniency for their own crimes or settling scores with rivals. Without independent corroboration, the information provided may be unreliable, leading to a flawed warrant and potential violations of Fourth Amendment rights. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a systematic and legally sound approach to investigations. This involves a continuous assessment of informant reliability, rigorous corroboration of intelligence, strict adherence to evidence handling protocols, and a thorough understanding of legal limitations, such as the prohibition against entrapment. The decision-making process should prioritize the integrity of the investigation and the admissibility of evidence, ensuring that all actions are justifiable under federal law and HSI policy. Question 3. Research into a recent HSI investigation in New York City has uncovered an encrypted external hard drive within a suspect's residence. The drive was not immediately accessible due to its encryption. As a special agent on the scene, what is the most appropriate and legally compliant course of action regarding this discovery? Option A. Immediately report the discovery of the encrypted drive to the designated evidence custodian and the supervisory special agent in charge, SAC. Option B. Secure the encrypted drive in your personal vehicle for safekeeping until you can research decryption techniques later. Option C. Attempt to access the encrypted drive using available decryption tools to determine its contents as quickly as possible. Option D. Inform other agents working on unrelated cases and trusted external contacts about the discovery to solicit their advice on decryption methods. Correct answer is A. Immediately report the discovery of the encrypted drive to the designated evidence custodian and the supervisory special agent in charge, SAC. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the sensitive nature of the information involved and the potential for it to be misinterpreted or misused, impacting ongoing investigations and interagency cooperation. The agent must balance the need for information sharing with the imperative to maintain operational security and adhere to strict legal and policy frameworks governing evidence handling and disclosure. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any information shared is done so through authorized channels and with appropriate safeguards. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately reporting the discovery of the encrypted drive to the designated evidence custodian and the supervisory special agent in charge, SAC. This approach is correct because it adheres to the established chain of custody protocols for evidence, as mandated by Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, policy and federal law e.g. Title 18 U.S. Code concerning the preservation and handling of evidence. It ensures that the drive is properly logged, secured, and that any subsequent analysis or disclosure is conducted by authorized personnel under strict legal and procedural guidelines, preventing unauthorized access or contamination of evidence. This also ensures that the appropriate legal authorities are informed for potential search warrants or disclosure requests. Incorrect approach is analysis. Attempting to access the encrypted drive without proper authorization or a warrant is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This violates the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which protects against unreasonable searches and seizures, and HSI policy regarding evidence handling. It could lead to the suppression of any evidence found, compromise the investigation, and result in disciplinary action or legal repercussions for the agent. Sharing the existence of the encrypted drive with other agents not directly involved in the case, or with external contacts, without supervisory approval, constitutes a breach of operational security and confidentiality. This could alert potential subjects, compromise ongoing investigations, and violate HSI directives on information sharing and the protection of sensitive case details. It undermines the integrity of the investigation and could have severe consequences for national security. Storing the encrypted drive in an unsecured location or attempting to decrypt it using personal or unauthorized equipment is a critical failure in evidence preservation and chain of custody. This risks the integrity of the evidence, potentially rendering it inadmissible in court. It also violates HSI regulations designed to prevent tampering, loss, or unauthorized access to evidence, and could expose sensitive data to compromise. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should follow a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established protocols and legal mandates. This involves 1. Recognizing the nature of the discovery as potential evidence. 2. Immediately consulting HSI policy and relevant federal statutes regarding evidence handling and chain of custody. 3. Reporting the discovery through the proper chain of command to the SAC and evidence custodian. 4. Awaiting further instructions and authorization for any subsequent actions, such as obtaining a warrant for decryption or analysis. This systematic approach ensures legal compliance, maintains evidence integrity, and protects the operational security of ongoing investigations. Question 4. Which approach would be most appropriate for a Homeland Security Investigations, HSI special agent in California to take when investigating a suspected cross-border smuggling operation involving Canada, where a confidential informant has provided information suggesting the use of a specific Canadian shipping company? Option A. Proceed with surveillance and intelligence gathering within the United States based on the informant's information, without immediately engaging Canadian authorities to build a stronger case before making any formal requests. Option B. Share the informant's detailed allegations with the informant's handler and instruct the handler to discreetly gather more information from the informant without formalizing the request through official channels. Option C. Initiate a formal request for assistance through the HSI Office of International Operations to engage with Canadian law enforcement and relevant authorities under the existing Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty (MLAT) framework, ensuring all information gathering adheres to U.S. federal law and the terms of the MLAT. Option D. Directly contact the Canadian shipping company via email or phone to inquire about their operations and any potential involvement in smuggling activities, based on the informant's tip. The correct answer is C. Initiate a formal request for assistance through the HSI Office of International Operations to engage with Canadian law enforcement and relevant authorities under the existing Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty (MLAT) framework, ensuring all information gathering adheres to U.S. federal law and the terms of the MLAT. Explanation: this scenario is professionally challenging because it involves a sensitive international element, potential for dual criminality, and the need to balance investigative objectives with adherence to specific jurisdictional laws and interagency protocols. A HSI special agent must navigate these complexities while ensuring all actions are lawful and ethically sound, particularly when dealing with foreign law enforcement agencies. The best approach involves meticulously verifying the evidence against the specific requirements of the United States Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty (MLAT) with Canada, and ensuring all requests for information or assistance are channeled through the designated HSI International Operations Unit. This ensures that the investigation remains within legal boundaries, respects the sovereignty of both nations, and leverages established diplomatic and legal frameworks for international cooperation. This method upholds the integrity of the investigation by ensuring that any evidence obtained is admissible and that the process is transparent and legally defensible under both U.S. and Canadian law, as well as the terms of the MLAT. An approach that bypasses official channels and directly contacts Canadian law enforcement for information, while seemingly efficient, carries significant risks. It could violate the terms of the MLAT, potentially render any obtained evidence inadmissible in U.S. courts, and create diplomatic friction between the two countries. Furthermore, it circumvents the established protocols designed to ensure that international requests are properly vetted and executed in accordance with both nations' legal systems. Another problematic approach would be to proceed with the investigation based solely on the information provided by the informant, without independent verification or formal requests for assistance from Canadian authorities. This could lead to the collection of unreliable or illegally obtained evidence, jeopardizing the entire case and potentially violating the informant's rights or Canadian privacy laws. Finally, an approach that involves sharing sensitive investigative details with the informant to solicit further information, without proper authorization or consideration of the informant's potential motives or reliability, is also professionally unsound. This could compromise the investigation, expose the informant to undue risk, and violate departmental policies regarding informant handling and information security. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance, interagency cooperation, and evidence integrity. This involves understanding the relevant international agreements, consulting with legal counsel and specialized units, like HSI's international operations, and meticulously documenting all investigative steps and communications. Question 5. The evaluation methodology shows that a Homeland Security Investigations HSI special agent in Texas is responding to a tip regarding potential contraband being stored in a vacant warehouse. Upon arrival, the agent observes a package that appears to contain illicit substances through a broken window. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the agent to take to ensure the integrity of the investigation and any potential evidence? Option A. Secure the perimeter of the warehouse, immediately notify a supervisor and the HSI evidence custodian, and await further instructions for evidence collection. Option B. Discreetly observe the warehouse from a distance and wait to see if anyone accesses the package before taking any action. Option C. Enter the warehouse, collect the suspected contraband and transport it directly to the nearest HSI evidence locker. Option D. Leave the scene to locate a supervisor and obtain explicit permission to enter and collect the evidence. The correct answer is A. Secure the perimeter of the warehouse, immediately notify a supervisor and the HSI evidence custodian, and await further instructions for evidence collection. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge involving potential evidence tampering and the compromise of an ongoing investigation. The agent must balance the urgency of securing evidence with the imperative to adhere strictly to established protocols to maintain the integrity of the investigation and any subsequent legal proceedings. Failure to do so could lead to the exclusion of crucial evidence, jeopardizing the case and undermining public trust in law enforcement. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately securing the scene and notifying the appropriate supervisory personnel and the evidence custodian. This approach ensures that the chain of custody for any discovered evidence is maintained from the outset. By involving supervisors and the evidence custodian, the agent triggers the established protocols for evidence collection, documentation, and preservation, which are critical for admissibility in court. This aligns with the fundamental principles of evidence handling mandated by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and federal law enforcement guidelines, emphasizing integrity and accountability. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves the agent personally collecting and transporting the suspected contraband without proper documentation or notification. This bypasses the established chain of custody protocols, creating a significant risk of evidence tampering allegations and rendering the evidence inadmissible. It violates the principles of evidence integrity and accountability. Another incorrect approach is to leave the scene unattended while seeking further instructions, especially if the contraband is in plain view and could be easily removed or altered by others. This demonstrates a failure to secure potential evidence, which is a primary responsibility of an agent at a scene. It prioritizes procedural delay over immediate evidence preservation. A third incorrect approach is to dispose of the suspected contraband immediately without proper documentation or supervisory approval. This constitutes direct evidence destruction and tampering, a severe ethical and legal violation that would irrevocably compromise the investigation and lead to severe disciplinary action, including criminal charges. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Homeland Security investigations must employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established protocols and the preservation of evidence integrity. This involves 1. Immediate scene assessment and securing potential evidence. 2. Prompt notification of supervisors and relevant specialized units, e.g., evidence custodians. 3. Strict adherence to documented procedures for collection, preservation, and transportation of evidence. 4. Maintaining a clear and unbroken chain of custody. 5. Understanding that any deviation from protocol, however well-intentioned, can have severe legal and professional repercussions. Question 6. The assessment process reveals that Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, Special Agent Rodriguez, while conducting surveillance in New York, has received credible, albeit uncorroborated, intelligence suggesting that a known individual with ties to international smuggling operations is planning to transport illicit goods within the next 24 hours. Agent Rodriguez observes the individual meeting with an unknown associate in a public parking lot, exchanging a nondescript package. While Agent Rodriguez suspects the package contains contraband, there is no direct visual confirmation of illegal items, and the situation does not present an immediate, overt threat to public safety that would justify immediate warrantless entry or search. What is the most appropriate course of action for Agent Rodriguez to take? Option A. Immediately detain the individual and search their vehicle based on the suspicion of illegal activity and the potential for the contraband to be moved. Option B. Continue surveillance indefinitely until direct visual confirmation of the contraband is obtained, regardless of the potential for the goods to be moved. Option C. Document all observations and intelligence, then prepare and present a detailed affidavit to a U.S. magistrate judge to seek a search warrant for the individual and their vehicle. Option D. Contact the individual directly and question them about the package, hoping they will voluntarily disclose its contents. Correct answer is C. Document all observations and intelligence, then prepare and present a detailed affidavit to a U.S. magistrate judge to seek a search warrant for the individual and their vehicle. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a scenario that is professionally challenging due to the inherent tension between the need for swift action in national security matters and the imperative to adhere to established legal and ethical boundaries. A special agent must exercise sound judgment, balancing the urgency of potential threats with the requirement for due process and the protection of individual rights. Missteps can have severe consequences, including compromising investigations, undermining public trust, and leading to legal repercussions. The correct approach involves meticulously documenting all observations and intelligence gathered, and then presenting this information to the appropriate legal authority for a judicial determination of probable cause. This method is correct because it strictly adheres to the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which protects against unreasonable searches and seizures, and requires warrants to be judicially sanctioned and supported by probable cause. By seeking a warrant, the agent ensures that the proposed actions are reviewed by an impartial magistrate, thereby upholding constitutional principles and the rule of law. This process safeguards against overreach and ensures that investigative actions are legally justified. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with a search based solely on the agent's personal belief that illegal activity is occurring, without obtaining a warrant or establishing probable cause through independent legal review. This fails to meet the constitutional standard for searches and seizures, potentially rendering any evidence obtained inadmissible in court and exposing the agent and the agency to civil liability. Another incorrect approach involves delaying action indefinitely due to a lack of immediate, irrefutable proof, even when credible intelligence suggests an imminent threat. While caution is necessary, an unreasonable delay in the face of significant risk, without exploring all legal avenues for expedited action or consultation with legal counsel, could be seen as a dereliction of duty in protecting national security. A further incorrect approach would be to rely on information obtained through questionable or potentially illegal means to justify immediate action. This undermines the integrity of the investigation and the agency, as evidence obtained unlawfully is inadmissible and can taint the entire case. It also violates ethical guidelines regarding the conduct of law enforcement officers. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the available intelligence, a thorough understanding of relevant legal standards, such as probable cause and exigent circumstances, and consultation with supervisors and legal advisors. Agents must be prepared to articulate the factual basis for their actions and to seek judicial authorization when required, always prioritizing constitutional rights and legal compliance. Question 7. During an investigation into potential foreign influence operations within the United States, a Homeland Security Investigations (HSI) special agent observes a foreign national meeting with a U.S. citizen known to have access to sensitive government information. The agent believes the foreign national may be attempting to illicitly obtain classified data. The agent has not yet secured a warrant for surveillance or any other intrusive measures. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the agent to take? Option A. Continue discreet, lawful observation of the individual's interactions, meticulously documenting all details, and immediately report the observations and suspicions to their supervisor for further guidance, and to initiate the process for obtaining necessary legal authorizations. Option B. Immediately approach the foreign national and U.S. citizen to question them about their meeting and the nature of their relationship, without informing a supervisor. Option C. Initiate covert surveillance of the foreign national's residence and communications without a warrant, based on the suspicion of illicit data acquisition. Option D. Share the observed information with a trusted contact at another federal agency who has previously expressed interest in similar foreign intelligence matters, without formal reporting. Correct answer is A. Continue discreet, lawful observation of the individual's interactions, meticulously documenting all details, and immediately report the observations and suspicions to their supervisor for further guidance, and to initiate the process for obtaining necessary legal authorizations. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a scenario that is professionally challenging due to the inherent tension between the need for swift action to protect national security and the imperative to adhere strictly to legal and ethical boundaries. The agent must exercise sound judgment, balancing the urgency of the situation with the rights of individuals and the integrity of the investigation. Missteps can lead to compromised evidence, legal challenges, and damage to the agency's reputation. The correct approach involves meticulously documenting all observations and actions, prioritizing the collection of actionable intelligence through lawful means, and immediately reporting any potential violations of law or policy to supervisors. This is correct because it upholds the principles of due process and the rule of law, ensuring that any subsequent actions taken by HSI are legally defensible and ethically sound. Strict adherence to established protocols for evidence handling and reporting protects the integrity of the investigation and prevents the introduction of tainted evidence. Furthermore, prompt reporting to supervisors ensures that the agency is aware of potential issues and can provide guidance or initiate corrective actions, thereby maintaining accountability and transparency. This approach aligns with the core mission of HSI to investigate and disrupt criminal and national security threats while respecting civil liberties and legal frameworks within the United States. An incorrect approach would be to disregard established procedures for evidence collection and reporting in favor of expediency. This failure to document meticulously and report potential violations undermines the legal basis of the investigation, potentially rendering collected evidence inadmissible in court. It also bypasses supervisory oversight, which is critical for ensuring that investigations remain within legal and ethical boundaries. Such an approach risks violating individuals' rights and could lead to severe repercussions for the agent and the agency. Another incorrect approach would be to engage in unauthorized surveillance or information gathering that exceeds the agent's legal authority. This not only violates the rights of the individuals being investigated, but also exposes the agent and HSI to significant legal liability and can compromise the entire investigation by introducing illegally obtained information. The principle of probable cause and the requirement for appropriate legal authorization, such as warrants, are fundamental safeguards that cannot be circumvented, even in the interest of national security. A further incorrect approach would be to share sensitive, unverified intelligence with unauthorized parties outside of the established interagency communication channels. This can lead to the premature exposure of an investigation, compromise ongoing operations, and potentially misinform other agencies, leading to misguided actions. Maintaining the confidentiality and controlled dissemination of intelligence is paramount to operational security and the effectiveness of HSI's mission. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of legal authorities and limitations, a commitment to ethical conduct, and a reliance on established investigative protocols. Agents should always prioritize lawful methods, maintain thorough documentation, and seek guidance from supervisors when faced with ambiguous situations or potential ethical dilemmas. The principle of investigate thoroughly but lawfully should guide every action. Question 8. Risk assessment procedures indicate a credible but uncorroborated tip regarding potential illicit material being stored at private residence in Houston, Texas, which could pose a national security risk. As a Homeland Security Investigations HSI Special Agent, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action? Option A. Immediately conduct a full search of the private residence to ensure no immediate threat is present. Option B. Detain the occupants of the residence for questioning based on the tip alone. Option C. Initiate a preliminary assessment by discreetly gathering publicly available information and consulting with HSI intelligence resources to corroborate the tip and establish reasonable suspicion. Option D. Contact local news outlets to alert them to the potential threat and the ongoing investigation. The correct answer is C. Initiate a preliminary assessment by discreetly gathering publicly available information and consulting with HSI intelligence resources to corroborate the tip and establish reasonable suspicion. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the need for swift action in a potential national security threat and the imperative to adhere to established legal and ethical protocols. The agent must balance the urgency of the situation with the rights of individuals and the integrity of the investigation. Missteps could compromise evidence, violate civil liberties, and undermine the credibility of Homeland Security Investigations (HSI). Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately initiating a preliminary assessment to gather actionable intelligence without infringing on rights. This approach prioritizes obtaining a factual basis for further action, such as seeking a warrant or other legal authority, by leveraging available HSI resources and interagency cooperation. This aligns with HSI's mandate to investigate threats to national security and public safety, while respecting due process and legal boundaries as outlined in U.S. federal law and HSI operational guidelines. The focus is on building a legally sound case for intervention. Incorrect approaches analysis. Initiating a full search of the property without any prior legal authorization or exigent circumstances would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action violates Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable searches and seizures, potentially rendering any discovered evidence inadmissible and exposing the agent and HSI to legal repercussions. Directly confronting and detaining individuals based solely on a vague tip, without any corroborating evidence or articulable suspicion, constitutes an overreach of authority. This infringes upon individual liberties and could lead to false accusations and legal challenges, failing to uphold the principles of justice and due process mandated by U.S. law. Contacting the media to report on the suspicious activity before any official determination or legal process has been initiated is a severe breach of protocol and ethical conduct. This action compromises the integrity of the investigation, potentially jeopardizes ongoing operations, and violates HSI's confidentiality requirements, demonstrating a lack of professional discretion and adherence to investigative standards. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must employ a systematic decision-making process that begins with information gathering and assessment. This involves evaluating the credibility and specificity of intelligence, identifying potential legal avenues for investigation, and consulting with supervisors and legal counsel when necessary. The guiding principle is to act within the bounds of the law and established policy, ensuring that all actions are justified, proportionate, and aimed at achieving legitimate investigative objectives while safeguarding individual rights. Question 9. Process analysis reveals that an HSI special agent operating in California has received credible intelligence regarding a significant sum of money, suspected to be proceeds of illicit activities, being prepared for immediate transfer from a U.S. bank account to a financial institution in a foreign country. The transfer is scheduled to occur within the next 24 hours, and the agent believes the funds are linked to a broader international criminal enterprise. The agent needs to act swiftly to prevent the dissipation of these assets, but must also ensure all actions are legally sound and within HSI's jurisdictional purview. What is the most appropriate course of action for the HSI special agent in California? Option A. Directly contact the foreign bank via informal means to request they place a hold on the incoming funds, citing the suspected illicit nature of the transaction. Option B. Conduct further surveillance on the U.S.-based individuals associated with the account to gather more evidence before taking any action regarding the international transfer. Option C. Immediately initiate a formal request for international assistance through established HSI channels, coordinating with FIN-CEN and relevant foreign law enforcement counterparts via mutual legal assistance treaties or other formal agreements to seek a temporary asset freeze or seizure order. Option D. Reach out to the foreign law enforcement agency directly through personal contact information to alert them and request their immediate intervention in freezing the funds. The correct answer is C. Immediately initiate a formal request for international assistance through established HSI channels, coordinating with FIN-CEN and relevant foreign law enforcement counterparts via mutual legal assistance treaties or other formal agreements to seek a temporary asset freeze or seizure order. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for an HSI special agent in California involving the potential for international money laundering and the need to balance investigative urgency with the meticulous adherence to legal and jurisdictional boundaries. The agent must act decisively to prevent the illicit transfer of funds, while ensuring all actions are lawful and within the scope of HSI's authority in California, avoiding actions that could compromise the investigation or lead to legal challenges. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately initiating a formal request for international assistance through established HSI channels, specifically the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN, and the relevant foreign law enforcement counterparts via mutual legal assistance treaties, MLAT, or other formal agreements. This approach is correct because it respects the jurisdictional complexities of international finance and law enforcement cooperation. By utilizing official channels, the agent ensures that the request for intervention is legally sound, properly documented, and executed by authorities with the appropriate jurisdiction in the foreign country. This upholds the integrity of the investigation and adheres to the principles of international comity and the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA, implications, which often govern such cross-border financial investigations. Incorrect approaches analysis. Initiating a direct, informal communication with the foreign bank to freeze the funds without prior authorization or established protocols is an incorrect approach. This bypasses necessary legal and diplomatic procedures, potentially violating international banking regulations and the sovereignty of the foreign nation. It could also lead to the bank refusing the request due to lack of official standing, tipping off the subjects, or even legal repercussions for unauthorized interference. Contacting the foreign law enforcement agency directly via personal email or phone without going through official HSI liaison channels is also an incorrect approach. While seemingly expedient, this lacks the formal structure and documentation required for international cooperation. It risks miscommunication, misinterpretation of intent, and may not be recognized as a legitimate request by the foreign agency, potentially jeopardizing the investigation and straining diplomatic relations. Attempting to gather further intelligence by conducting surveillance on the U.S.-based individuals involved without a clear nexus to the foreign transaction or a specific warrant for such surveillance is an incorrect approach. While intelligence gathering is crucial, it must be conducted within the legal framework of U.S. law and HSI's authority in California. Acting outside these parameters could lead to the suppression of evidence and violate the privacy rights of the individuals, undermining the entire investigation. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a structured decision-making process that prioritizes legal compliance and interagency cooperation. First, assess the immediate threat and the available intelligence. Second, identify the relevant legal frameworks and jurisdictional boundaries, both domestic California and federal U.S. laws and international. Third, consult with supervisors and legal counsel to determine the most appropriate and lawful course of action. Fourth, utilize established protocols and official channels for international cooperation, ensuring all actions are documented and authorized. This systematic approach ensures that investigative objectives are met while upholding the rule of law and maintaining professional integrity. Question 10. During a warranted search of a suspected smuggling operation in Houston, Texas, HSI special agents seize a variety of items, including bulk currency, electronic devices, and several unmarked, sealed containers. The initial assessment suggests the currency and electronics are of high evidentiary value. The team is under significant time pressure to complete the search and secure the location before potential destruction of evidence. Special Agent in Charge, SAC, needs to ensure all seized items are properly handled to maintain their admissibility in court. The SAC estimates the total value of the seized currency to be approximately $75,000, with an additional estimated value of $15,000 for the electronic devices. The unmarked containers' contents are unknown, but are believed to be related to the smuggling activities. The SAC must decide on the most appropriate method for documenting and securing all seized items given the operational constraints. Option A. Rely on the initial visual assessment of the items and verbally instruct the evidence custodian to log the currency and electronics, noting the presence of several unmarked containers without specific details. The formal inventory of the containers will be completed by a different team upon their arrival at the HSI evidence facility. Option B. Immediately inventory all seized items, including the unmarked containers, meticulously documenting each item's description, quantity, and location of seizure on a detailed evidence log. Package each item appropriately, assign a unique evidence number, and initiate the chain of custody transfer to the HSI evidence vault, ensuring all documentation is completed before leaving the scene. Option C. Prioritize the inventory and packaging of the currency and electronic devices, as these are clearly the most valuable and directly related to to the suspected smuggling. The unmarked containers can be inventoried and logged later at the HSI office once the immediate operational pressures have subsided. Option D. Assign a junior agent to quickly photograph all seized items, including the unmarked containers, and then have the team focus on securing the currency and electronics. The detailed inventory and chain of custody for all items will be completed by the SAC upon return to the HSI office. The correct answer is B. Immediately inventory all seized items, including the unmarked containers, meticulously documenting each item's description, quantity, and location of seizure on a detailed evidence log. Package each item appropriately, assign a unique evidence number, and initiate the chain of custody transfer to the HSI evidence vault, ensuring all documentation is completed before leaving the scene. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a scenario that is professionally challenging due to the inherent tension between operational efficiency and the meticulous adherence to legal and procedural requirements. As an HSI special agent, maintaining the integrity of evidence and ensuring proper chain of custody are paramount, directly impacting the admissibility of evidence in court and the successful prosecution of criminal cases. Need to quickly process information and make decisions under pressure must be balanced with the absolute necessity of following established protocols. This scenario requires a deep understanding of HSI's investigative procedures and the legal ramifications of deviations. The best approach involves a systematic and documented process that prioritizes the secure handling and accurate recording of all seized items, regardless of their perceived immediate value. This includes meticulous inventorying, proper packaging, and immediate transfer to secure evidence storage, all while ensuring that every step is documented in accordance with HSI's evidence handling manual and relevant Department of Homeland Security directives. This approach is correct because it directly aligns with the legal and regulatory framework governing evidence collection and preservation. The chain of custody must be unbroken and verifiable to prevent challenges to the evidence's integrity. Accurate documentation ensures accountability and transparency, which are critical for both internal investigations and judicial proceedings. This method upholds the principles of due process and the rule of law. An incorrect approach would be to prioritize speed over thoroughness by only documenting items that appear to be of significant evidentiary value, leaving less obvious items unrecorded or improperly stored. This failure to document and secure all seized items creates significant gaps in the chain of custody, making the evidence vulnerable to suppression in court, violates HSI's procedural mandates for evidence handling, and undermines the credibility of the investigation. Another incorrect approach involves relying on informal notes or verbal confirmations for the transfer of evidence, rather than completing official chain of custody forms. This practice introduces ambiguity and a lack of verifiable accountability. Without proper documentation, it becomes impossible to prove who had possession of the evidence at any given time, thereby compromising its admissibility. This directly contravenes established HSI protocols designed to prevent tampering or loss. A further incorrect approach would be to delegate the initial inventory and packaging of seized items to an untrained individual without direct supervision and verification by a special agent. While delegation can be a tool for efficiency, the responsibility for the integrity of evidence ultimately rests with the special agent. Improper handling by an untrained individual can lead to contamination, damage, or misidentification of evidence, all of which can have severe legal consequences. This violates the principle of direct oversight and accountability for critical investigative steps. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of HSI's standard operating procedures, SOP, for evidence handling. For initiating any seizure or processing, agents should mentally or physically, if time permits, review the required steps. When faced with time constraints, the agent must assess whether the urgency of the situation necessitates a deviation from standard procedure, and if so, ensure that any deviation is fully justified, documented, and approved according to HSI policy, with a plan to rectify any procedural gaps as soon as operationally feasible. The guiding principle should always be the preservation of evidence integrity and the adherence to legal standards. Question 11. Quality control measures reveal that a known associate of a foreign terrorist organization has entered a residential property in Miami, Florida, and intelligence suggests the property may contain evidence of ongoing terrorist plotting. The associate is observed entering the property, but there is no immediate indication of an active attack being planned for the next few hours. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action for the HSI special agent on scene? Option A. Conduct an immediate warrantless search of the property based on the strong suspicion of terrorist plotting and the potential for evidence. Option B. Contact a confidential informant to gather more immediate, uncorroborated information to justify a warrantless entry. Option C. Secure the perimeter of the property to prevent the destruction or removal of evidence and immediately begin the process of obtaining a search warrant based on probable cause. Option D. Wait for a supervisor to arrive and provide further instructions before taking any action, even securing the scene. The correct answer is C. Secure the perimeter of the property to prevent the destruction or removal of evidence and immediately begin the process of obtaining a search warrant based on probable cause. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an HSI special agent to balance the immediate need for information with the imperative to uphold the legal rights of individuals and maintain the integrity of potential evidence. The agent must act decisively without compromising due process or creating grounds for suppression of evidence in future legal proceedings. The pressure to gather intelligence quickly in a national security context can create a temptation to bypass established protocols, making careful judgment and adherence to legal standards paramount. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately securing the scene to prevent further contamination or destruction of evidence, and then initiating the process to obtain a lawful search warrant based on probable cause. This approach is correct because it respects the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. By securing the scene, the agent preserves the integrity of potential evidence while simultaneously working within the legal framework to obtain judicial authorization for a search. This ensures that any evidence obtained will be admissible in court and upholds the principles of due process. Incorrect approaches analysis. Initiating an immediate search of the premises without a warrant, even with a strong suspicion, is a regulatory and ethical failure. This directly violates the Fourth Amendment's requirement for warrants based on probable cause, rendering any evidence discovered during such a search potentially inadmissible. It also undermines public trust in law enforcement by demonstrating a disregard for constitutional protections. Contacting a confidential informant for immediate, uncorroborated information to justify a warrantless search is also a failure. While informants can be valuable sources, their information alone, without independent corroboration or a clear demonstration of probable cause, is insufficient to bypass the warrant requirement. Relying solely on such information risks acting on unreliable tips and violating constitutional rights. Delaying the investigation to consult with legal counsel before taking any action, including securing the scene, is also an incorrect approach in this immediate situation. While legal consultation is vital, the immediate need to preserve evidence in a potentially ongoing criminal or terrorist activity scenario necessitates prompt action to secure the location. The agent can and should secure the scene while simultaneously initiating the warrant process and seeking legal advice. Failing to secure the scene could lead to the irreversible loss of critical evidence. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Homeland Security investigations must employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes constitutional rights and legal procedures while remaining agile in responding to threats. This involves 1. Assessing the immediate threat and the potential for evidence destruction or compromise. 2. Taking lawful steps to preserve the integrity of the situation, e.g., securing the scene. 3. Diligently pursuing legal authorization, e.g., a search warrant based on established probable cause, utilizing all available and lawful investigative tools. 4. Consulting with legal counsel at appropriate junctures to ensure all actions are legally sound. This systematic approach ensures that investigations are both effective and legally defensible. Question 12. The assessment process reveals credible, albeit preliminary, intelligence suggesting a potential nexus between an individual's online activities and extremist ideologies. As a Homeland Security Investigations (HSI) special agent in New York, what is the most appropriate initial step to assess the risk posed by this individual? Option A. Initiate a broad surveillance operation on the individual's known associates and financial transactions based on the general nature of the intelligence. Option B. Conduct a targeted review of publicly available online information and any lawfully obtained digital communications to identify specific indicators of intent, capability, or opportunity related to a threat. Option C. Immediately escalate the intelligence to all relevant federal and state law enforcement agencies for a wider investigation without further internal assessment. Option D. Focus investigative efforts on the individual's ethnic background and religious affiliations to determine if they align with known extremist groups. Correct answer is B. Conduct a targeted review of publicly available online information and any lawfully obtained digital communications to identify specific indicators of intent, capability, or opportunity related to a threat. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a critical juncture in a Homeland Security investigations, HSI special agent's approach to a potential threat. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the imperative to investigate and mitigate risks with the fundamental rights and privacy of individuals. A hasty or overly broad approach could lead to civil rights violations, damage public trust, and compromise the integrity of the investigation. Conversely, an overly cautious approach might miss crucial indicators or delay necessary intervention, potentially allowing a threat to materialize. Careful judgment is required to navigate these competing demands effectively and ethically. The best approach involves a targeted and evidence-based risk assessment that prioritizes specific, articulable threats. This method is correct because it aligns with the principles of due process and the legal standards governing investigations. HSI special agents are bound by the U.S. Constitution and federal statutes that protect individual liberties. A risk assessment that focuses on concrete indicators of potential criminal activity or national security threats, rather than broad generalizations or profiling, ensures that investigative resources are deployed efficiently and ethically. This approach respects privacy while allowing for the necessary collection of information to assess and address genuine risks. An approach that relies on generalized suspicion or demographic profiling is incorrect. This fails to meet the legal standard for initiating intrusive investigative actions and violates ethical guidelines against discrimination. Such methods can lead to the unwarranted scrutiny of innocent individuals, erode community relations, and undermine the legitimacy of HSI's mission. Another incorrect approach is to delay assessment indefinitely due to a fear of overreach. While caution is necessary, an inability to make timely assessments based on available information can be detrimental to national security. The law requires agents to act when reasonable suspicion or probable cause exists, and prolonged inaction in the face of potential threats is a dereliction of duty. Finally, an approach that involves sharing sensitive, unverified information with unauthorized parties is professionally unacceptable. This breaches confidentiality, can lead to the spread of misinformation, and may compromise ongoing investigations. Agents have a duty to protect sensitive information and disseminate it only through proper channels. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying specific, observable indicators. This is followed by a thorough assessment of these indicators against established threat criteria, considering the totality of the circumstances. Legal and ethical boundaries must be continuously evaluated throughout the process, ensuring that any investigative actions are proportionate to the identified risk and are conducted in accordance with all applicable laws and departmental policies. Question 13. Governance review demonstrates that a Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, special agent operating in Texas has received a tip from a confidential informant regarding ongoing drug trafficking activity at a specific warehouse. The informant claims to have direct knowledge of the type and quantity of narcotics present. What is the most appropriate course of action for the agent to take to initiate an investigation based on this information? Option A. Advise the informant that their cooperation will be rewarded with leniency on a separate, unrelated pending charge, and then act on the tip. Option B. Proceed directly to the warehouse with a search warrant based solely on the informant's tip, without further independent verification. Option C. Instruct the informant to acquire a sample of the narcotics from the warehouse to provide as evidence. Option D. Immediately dispatch a surveillance team to monitor the warehouse and begin corroborating the informant's information through independent means, such as reviewing shipping manifests and known associates, before taking any overt action. The correct answer is D. Immediately dispatch a surveillance team to monitor the warehouse and begin corroborating the informant's information through independent means, such as reviewing shipping manifests and known associates, before taking any overt action. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between the need for timely information gathering and the strict adherence to legal and ethical boundaries governing evidence handling and informant management within Homeland Security investigations, HSI, operations in Texas. The agent must balance operational effectiveness with the imperative to maintain the integrity of investigations and uphold the trust placed in HSI by the public and the justice system. Failure to do so can compromise ongoing investigations, lead to the suppression of evidence, and damage the reputation of the agency. The best approach involves meticulously documenting all interactions and information received from the confidential informant, ensuring that any evidence obtained through the informant is handled in strict accordance with the Texas Code of Criminal Procedure and HSI's internal guidelines for confidential informant operations. This includes verifying the informant's reliability through independent corroboration before acting on information, maintaining a clear chain of custody for any physical evidence, and ensuring that the informant's activities do not involve illegal entrapment or coercion. This approach is correct because it prioritizes legal compliance and evidentiary integrity, which are fundamental to successful prosecution and maintaining public trust. It aligns with the principles of due process and the requirement for reliable, legally obtained evidence, an approach that involves immediately acting on the informant's tip without independent verification, especially when the tip suggests potential illegal activity, is professionally unacceptable. This bypasses crucial steps in risk assessment and evidence validation, potentially leading to a flawed investigation based on unreliable information. It risks violating the informant's rights and could result in the exclusion of critical evidence in court. Another professionally unacceptable approach is to provide the informant with specific instructions on how to acquire the contraband, thereby actively participating in the commission of a crime. This crosses the line into entrapment, which is illegal and unethical. It undermines the legitimacy of the investigation and can lead to severe legal repercussions for the agent and the agency. Furthermore, an approach that involves withholding information about the informant's potential criminal activity from supervisors and prosecutors is also unacceptable. Transparency and accountability are paramount in HSI operations. Such omissions can obscure potential conflicts of interest or biases held by the informant, compromising the integrity of the investigation and the fairness of the judicial process. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the relevant legal statutes and agency policies. This framework should include assessing the reliability of the source of information, independently corroborating any actionable intelligence, meticulously documenting all investigative steps and evidence handling, consulting with supervisors and legal counsel when uncertainties arise, and always prioritizing ethical conduct and adherence to the law over expediency. Question 14. The assessment process reveals that an HSI special agent in California is tasked with investigating potential foreign influence operations targeting state-level elections. The agent has received a tip from an unverified source suggesting a foreign national may be attempting to disseminate disinformation through social media platforms and encrypted messaging applications. What is the most appropriate risk assessment approach to guide the agent's investigative actions? Option A. Contact the foreign national directly to inquire about their activities, relying on their potential cooperation to assess the threat without seeking prior legal authorization. Option B. Focus exclusively on publicly available information and open-source intelligence, assuming that any relevant activity will be discoverable without requiring more intrusive investigative techniques. Option C. Develop a detailed threat profile based on the initial tip, cross-referencing it with known foreign adversary tactics and identifying specific, legally permissible investigative avenues in California that align with HSI's statutory authority, while prioritizing methods that respect privacy protections under Cal-ECPA and federal law. Option D. Immediately initiate broad social media monitoring and attempt to gain access to encrypted communications through any available means, prioritizing speed of intelligence gathering over strict adherence to legal process. The correct answer is C. Develop a detailed threat profile based on the initial tip, cross-referencing it with known foreign adversary tactics and identifying specific, legally permissible investigative avenues in California that align with HSI's statutory authority, while prioritizing methods that respect privacy protections under Cal-ECPA and federal law. Explanation: the assessment process reveals a scenario that is professionally challenging due to the inherent tension between the need for thorough intelligence gathering and the imperative to uphold individual privacy rights and legal boundaries. As an HSI special agent in California, navigating this requires a nuanced understanding of federal investigative mandates and state-specific privacy protections. The core challenge lies in balancing the proactive identification of potential threats with the legal and ethical constraints governing surveillance and information collection. The best approach involves a systematic and legally compliant risk assessment that prioritizes intelligence gathering through authorized and proportionate means. This entails developing a comprehensive threat profile based on credible, actionable intelligence, and then identifying potential investigative avenues that align with HSI's statutory authority in California. Crucially, this approach mandates adherence to the California Electronic Communications Privacy Act, Cal-ECPA, and federal statutes like the Stored Communications Act, ensuring that any data collection is legally justified, narrowly tailored, and conducted with appropriate warrants or legal process where required. This method ensures that investigative efforts are both effective and legally sound, minimizing the risk of civil liability or compromising ongoing investigations through improper methods. An incorrect approach would be to initiate broad, unfocused surveillance based on generalized suspicions without specific, articulable facts. This fails to meet the legal threshold for probable cause required for many investigative actions and could violate Cal-ECPA's stringent privacy protections for electronic communications. Such an approach risks generating inadmissible evidence and could lead to disciplinary action or legal challenges. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on publicly available information without considering the potential for misinterpretation or the limitations of open-source intelligence in establishing probable cause for more intrusive investigative measures. While open-source intelligence is a valuable tool, it is often insufficient on its own to justify actions that impinge on privacy rights under California law. Finally, an approach that bypasses established legal procedures for obtaining information, such as attempting to coerce cooperation or relying on informal, unauthorized information channels, is fundamentally flawed. This not only undermines the integrity of the investigation, but also exposes the agent and HSI to significant legal and ethical repercussions, violating principles of due process and lawful investigative conduct. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the investigative objective. This is followed by a thorough review of applicable federal and California state laws and regulations governing investigative techniques. The agent must then assess the available intelligence against these legal parameters to determine the most appropriate, lawful, and proportionate investigative steps, always prioritizing methods that respect individual rights while effectively pursuing national security and law enforcement objectives. Question 15. The assessment process reveals that a HSI special agent in California has received an anonymous tip alleging suspicious activity by an individual at a port of entry, citing vague descriptions of unusual behavior and frequent travel to regions of concern. The agent must determine the appropriate next steps for risk assessment and potential investigation. Option A. Initiate a preliminary background check and discrete surveillance based on the tip, documenting all observations and cross-referencing them with known threat indicators relevant to California's specific security landscape before considering any further action. Option B. Focus investigative efforts on the individual's ethnic background and religious affiliations, as these factors are often associated with potential security threats in the region. Option C. Disregard the tip entirely due to its anonymous nature, as anonymous tips are never sufficient grounds for any investigative action. Option D. Immediately detain the individual for questioning based on the anonymous tip, as the port of entry environment inherently presents a heightened risk. The correct answer is A. Initiate a preliminary background check and discrete surveillance based on the tip, documenting all observations and cross-referencing them with known threat indicators relevant to California's specific security landscape before considering any further action. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a critical scenario where a HSI special agent in California must evaluate potential threats to national security. This situation is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the imperative to investigate potential threats with the constitutional rights of individuals and the strict legal boundaries governing surveillance and information gathering. Misjudgments can lead to compromised investigations, legal challenges, and erosion of public trust. The best approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that meticulously documents observed behaviors and credible intelligence, aligning them with established criteria for elevated threat levels under California and federal law. This method prioritizes evidence-based decision-making, ensuring that any intrusive investigative actions are legally justified and proportionate to the assessed risk. It adheres to the Fourth Amendment's protection against unreasonable searches and seizures and the HSI's operational guidelines, which mandate probable cause or reasonable suspicion for investigative steps. This approach ensures that the agent acts within legal and ethical parameters, safeguarding both national security and individual liberties. An approach that relies solely on generalized suspicion or profiling based on protected characteristics is ethically and legally flawed. Such an approach violates anti-discrimination laws and principles of due process, potentially leading to the targeting of innocent individuals and undermining the legitimacy of HSI operations. It fails to meet the legal standards required for initiating surveillance or other investigative measures, which must be based on specific, articulable facts. An approach that prematurely escalates investigative measures without sufficient corroborating evidence or a clear nexus to a specific threat is also problematic. This can lead to overreach, violating privacy rights and potentially jeopardizing the investigation by alerting the subject prematurely or by collecting inadmissible evidence. It demonstrates a failure to adhere to the principle of proportionality in law enforcement actions. A professional reasoning framework for such situations involves a systematic evaluation of all available information. This includes identifying potential threats, assessing their credibility and imminence, and determining the appropriate legal basis for any investigative action. Agents must continuously review and update their risk assessments as new information becomes available, ensuring that their actions remain consistent with legal requirements and ethical standards. Consultation with legal counsel and supervisors is crucial when navigating complex jurisdictional and constitutional issues. Question 16. The assessment process reveals credible intelligence suggesting a potential foreign adversary is using a private residence in San Francisco, California, to coordinate cyber attacks targeting critical U.S. infrastructure. The intelligence indicates the presence of specialized computer equipment and encrypted communications devices within the residence. As an HSI special agent in California, what is the most appropriate course of action to mitigate the immediate threat and gather evidence? Option A. Approach the occupants of the residence to question them about their activities, using the intelligence as leverage to gain voluntary consent to search. Option B. Initiate surveillance of the residence to gather additional corroborating intelligence before considering any further action, even if the threat is perceived as ongoing. Option C. Immediately seek a federal search warrant from a United States magistrate judge based on the credible intelligence, detailing the specific items to be seized and the location, and then execute the warrant with appropriate tactical support. Option D. Conduct a warrantless search of the residence based on the urgency of the national security threat, believing that exigent circumstances justify immediate entry to prevent the destruction of evidence. The correct answer is C. Immediately seek a federal search warrant from a United States magistrate judge based on the credible intelligence, detailing the specific items to be seized and the location, and then execute the warrant with appropriate tactical support. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a critical scenario for an HSI special agent in California, involving the potential for a significant national security threat. The challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for information gathering with the strict legal and ethical boundaries governing investigations. The agent must navigate the complexities of probable cause, warrants, and the preservation of evidence, all while operating under the purview of federal law enforcement guidelines and California-specific procedural rules. Missteps can lead to compromised investigations, inadmissible evidence, and severe legal repercussions. The best approach involves a meticulous and legally sound process of risk assessment and evidence collection. This begins with a thorough evaluation of all available intelligence to establish probable cause for a search. If probable cause is established, the agent should then seek a federal search warrant from a United States magistrate judge, detailing the specific locations and items to be seized. This process ensures judicial oversight and adherence to Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable searches and seizures. Following the warrant's execution, all seized evidence must be meticulously documented, preserved, and handled according to strict chain-of-custody protocols. This methodical approach, grounded in established legal precedent and federal investigative standards, maximizes the likelihood of a successful prosecution while upholding constitutional rights. An approach that bypasses the warrant process based on a perceived urgency, even with credible intelligence, is fundamentally flawed. This violates the Fourth Amendment and federal statutes governing search and seizure. Such an action would likely result in the suppression of any evidence obtained, rendering the investigation ineffective and potentially exposing the agent and the agency to civil liability. Another unacceptable approach would be to rely solely on the intelligence without attempting to corroborate it through legally permissible means or seeking judicial authorization. This demonstrates a failure to conduct a comprehensive risk assessment and a disregard for the requirement of probable cause. It also neglects the importance of a structured investigative process that builds a strong case based on admissible evidence. Finally, an approach that involves interrogating individuals without proper legal advisement or a clear investigative objective, based on speculative intelligence, is also professionally unsound. This can lead to coerced statements, violations of an individual's rights, and can taint further investigative efforts. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance, ethical conduct, and thorough investigative methodology. This involves 1. Continuously assessing the credibility and sufficiency of intelligence. 2. Understanding and applying the legal standards for probable cause and warrant requirements. 3. Consulting with legal counsel, assistant United States attorneys, when navigating complex legal issues. 4. Meticulously documenting all investigative steps and evidence. 5. Prioritizing the preservation of constitutional rights throughout the investigation. Question 17. The assessment process reveals that an HSI special agent in California is considering initiating a covert surveillance operation to gather intelligence on a suspected transnational criminal organization. The agent believes the surveillance is crucial for identifying key players and their operational methods, but acknowledges potential risks related to privacy concerns and the possibility of the subjects detecting the surveillance, which could compromise the investigation. What is the most appropriate course of action for the agent to take regarding the risk assessment and planning of this surveillance? Option A. Consult with the HSI supervisory agent and the relevant assistant United States attorney (OSA) to discuss the proposed surveillance methods, potential risks, and legal considerations before proceeding. Option B. Proceed with the surveillance based on the agent's professional judgment, documenting the perceived risks and mitigation strategies internally. Option C. Initiate the surveillance and then report the methods and any encountered risks to supervisors and the OSA after the operation has concluded. Option D. Conduct a preliminary risk assessment focusing solely on the operational security of the surveillance, such as avoiding detection by the subjects, without involving supervisors or legal counsel at this stage. The correct answer is A. Consult with the HSI supervisory agent and the relevant assistant United States attorney (OSA) to discuss the proposed surveillance methods, potential risks, and legal considerations before proceeding. Explanation. The assessment process reveals a critical scenario for an HSI special agent in California, requiring a nuanced approach to risk assessment in a complex investigation. The challenge lies in balancing the need for thorough intelligence gathering with the imperative to avoid actions that could compromise ongoing operations or violate established legal and ethical standards. The agent must demonstrate an understanding of the potential ramifications of their information-gathering methods on both the investigation's integrity and the rights of individuals involved. The best approach involves a proactive and legally sound strategy. This entails consulting with the HSI supervisory agent and the relevant assistant United States attorney (OSA) to discuss the proposed surveillance methods. This collaborative step ensures that all actions are aligned with federal law, Department of Homeland Security policies, and the specific requirements of the investigation. It allows for a comprehensive risk assessment that considers legal precedents, potential evidentiary challenges, and the strategic implications of the surveillance. This approach is correct because it prioritizes legal compliance and operational integrity, ensuring that intelligence is gathered in a manner that is admissible in court and does not create undue risk to the investigation or innocent parties. It embodies the principle of acting within legal boundaries and seeking expert guidance when navigating complex investigative terrains. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the surveillance without prior consultation, relying solely on the agent's personal judgment of what constitutes a reasonable risk. This bypasses essential oversight and legal review, potentially leading to the collection of inadmissible evidence or even civil liability if privacy rights are infringed. Such an action fails to adhere to the principle of seeking supervisory approval for significant investigative steps, a cornerstone of responsible law enforcement practice. Another incorrect approach is to delay the consultation until after the surveillance has been conducted. This reactive stance undermines the purpose of risk assessment and consultation, which is to proactively identify and mitigate potential issues before they arise. It suggests a lack of foresight and a disregard for the importance of legal and supervisory guidance in shaping investigative strategy. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to limit the risk assessment to only the immediate operational risks, such as the possibility of detection by the subjects, while neglecting the broader legal and ethical implications. This narrow focus fails to account for the potential for evidence suppression, internal affairs investigations, or damage to HSI's reputation if the surveillance is deemed unlawful or unethical. Professionals in this field must employ a decision-making framework that emphasizes proactive consultation, thorough legal and ethical review, and a comprehensive understanding of the potential consequences of investigative actions. This involves understanding the chain of command, the importance of seeking legal counsel from HSI, and the ethical obligations to conduct investigations in a manner that upholds the law and respects individual rights. Question 18. Compliance review shows an HSI special agent in California has received credible, albeit uncorroborated, intelligence regarding an imminent threat to national security originating from a known suspect. The agent must decide on the next steps to gather further information and mitigate the threat. Which of the following approaches best balances the urgency of the situation with the legal and investigative requirements? Option A. Immediately initiate surveillance operations on the suspect without prior authorization, believing the urgency of the national security threat justifies bypassing standard protocols. Option B. Rely solely on the initial intelligence, using it to justify a direct, unannounced approach to confront the suspect and gather information. Option C. Delay any overt action until the intelligence is fully corroborated by multiple independent sources, even if this means potentially missing a critical window to intervene. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment in consultation with legal counsel and supervisors to determine the most appropriate and legally permissible methods for gathering further intelligence and mitigating the threat, prioritizing investigative integrity and constitutional rights. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment in consultation with legal counsel and supervisors to determine the most appropriate and legally permissible methods for gathering further intelligence and mitigating the threat, prioritizing investigative integrity and constitutional rights. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an HSI special agent to balance the immediate need for information with the imperative to maintain the integrity of an ongoing investigation and adhere to strict legal protocols. The agent must assess the potential risks associated with different information-gathering methods, considering both the immediate operational benefits and the long-term legal and investigative consequences. Failure to properly assess these risks could jeopardize the investigation, compromise evidence, or lead to legal challenges. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves a thorough risk assessment that prioritizes legal compliance and investigative integrity. This means carefully evaluating the potential benefits of obtaining information quickly against the risks of compromising the investigation, violating privacy rights, or creating inadmissible evidence. The agent should consult with legal counsel or supervisors to ensure that any proposed action aligns with the U.S. Constitution, federal statutes, and HSI policy. This approach ensures that information is gathered ethically and legally, preserving its admissibility in court and maintaining public trust. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately pursue the most direct method of obtaining information, such as unauthorized surveillance or interrogation without proper legal authorization. This bypasses necessary risk assessment and legal review, potentially violating Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable searches and seizures or Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination. Such actions could lead to evidence suppression, disciplinary action, and damage to the agent's career and HSI's reputation. Another incorrect approach is to delay action indefinitely due to an overemphasis on risk aversion, thereby missing a critical window of opportunity. Caution is necessary. Complete inaction can be as detrimental as reckless action. The agent must find a balance, conducting a timely yet comprehensive risk assessment to determine the most appropriate course of action within legal boundaries. Excessive delay can allow subjects to evade capture or destroy evidence, undermining the investigative mission. A third incorrect approach is to rely solely on informal intelligence or tips without independent verification or legal authorization for further investigative steps. While informal intelligence can be a starting point, acting upon it without a proper risk assessment and legal framework can lead to misguided actions, wasted resources, and potential legal repercussions if privacy is infringed upon without justification. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Homeland Security investigations must adopt a systematic decision-making process that begins with a clear understanding of the objective. This is followed by identifying potential risks and benefits associated with various courses of action. Crucially, this assessment must be grounded in the U.S. Constitution, federal laws, and HSI directives. Consultation with legal experts and supervisors is paramount to ensure all actions are lawful and strategically sound. The agent should then select the approach that maximizes investigative success while minimizing legal and ethical risks, prioritizing the integrity of the investigation and the admissibility of evidence. Question 19. The audit findings indicate a potential for unauthorized access to sensitive citizen data within a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement (ICE) field office. Considering the operational demands of investigations and the legal mandates for data protection, which of the following represents the most appropriate initial response to mitigate this identified risk? Option A. Immediately implement a complete moratorium on all access to the sensitive data until a new, more restrictive access control policy can be drafted and approved. Option B. Initiate a comprehensive, documented risk assessment to identify specific vulnerabilities, evaluate potential impacts, and develop targeted mitigation strategies in consultation with relevant stakeholders. Option C. Conduct a series of informal interviews with a few senior agents to gauge their perception of the risk and make immediate, ad hoc adjustments to access permissions based on their feedback. Option D. Rely on the existing, unverified security protocols and assume that the audit findings are based on isolated incidents rather than systemic issues. The correct answer is B. Initiate a comprehensive, documented risk assessment to identify specific vulnerabilities, evaluate potential impacts, and develop targeted mitigation strategies in consultation with relevant stakeholders. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential vulnerability in the data handling procedures of a U.S. federal agency responsible for national security intelligence. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the imperative to protect sensitive information from unauthorized access or disclosure with the need to conduct thorough investigations and maintain operational effectiveness. A misstep could compromise national security, lead to severe legal repercussions, or erode public trust. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all actions taken are compliant with U.S. federal law, specifically the Privacy Act of 1974 and relevant Homeland Security directives concerning data security and access. The best professional approach involves a systematic and documented risk assessment process that prioritizes data protection while enabling necessary operational functions. This approach entails identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities to sensitive data, evaluating the likelihood and impact of those threats, and then implementing appropriate security controls and mitigation strategies. This aligns with the principles of data stewardship and accountability mandated by federal regulations, ensuring that data is handled in a manner that safeguards privacy and security. The process should be iterative, with regular reviews and updates to adapt to evolving threats and technological changes. An incorrect approach would be to immediately implement broad, sweeping restrictions on data access without a thorough assessment of operational needs. This could cripple legitimate investigative activities, hinder interagency cooperation, and create an environment where necessary information is inaccessible, thereby undermining the agency's core mission. Such an action would likely violate the spirit, if not the letter, of directives that require balancing security with operational requirements. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on anecdotal evidence or past incidents to justify security measures. While past events can inform risk assessment, they should not be the sole basis for policy. A comprehensive assessment requires a structured analysis of current threats, vulnerabilities, and the potential impact on data integrity and privacy. Failing to conduct a formal, documented risk assessment can lead to inefficient allocation of resources, overlooking critical vulnerabilities, or implementing overly burdensome controls that do not effectively address the actual risks. A third incorrect approach is to delegate the entire risk assessment process to a single individual or department without broader consultation. Effective risk management requires input from various stakeholders, including IT security, legal counsel, and operational units. Without this collaborative approach, the assessment may be incomplete, biased, or fail to consider the full spectrum of risks and operational impacts. This can lead to the implementation of inadequate or inappropriate security measures, leaving the agency exposed. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the scope of the risk assessment, identifying all relevant data assets and their sensitivity levels. This should be followed by a systematic identification of potential threats and vulnerabilities, considering both internal and external factors. The likelihood and impact of each identified risk should then be analyzed, leading to the development and prioritization of mitigation strategies. Finally, the chosen strategies should be implemented, monitored, and regularly reviewed to ensure their effectiveness and compliance with all applicable U.S. federal laws and regulations. Question 20. Strategic planning requires Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, in the United States to assess the potential financial impact of various threats. An HSI field office is evaluating the risk posed by a specific type of cyber intrusion targeting critical infrastructure. Historical data suggests that such an intrusion has a 15% probability of occurring within the next fiscal year. If this intrusion occurs, the estimated financial impact, including direct costs, recovery efforts, and economic disruption, is projected to be $50 million. What is the expected financial loss associated with this cyber intrusion threat? Option A, $5,000,000. Option B, $50,000,000. Option C, $15,000,000. Option D, $7,500,000. The correct answer is D, $7,500,000. Explanation. Strategic planning requires a thorough understanding of resource allocation and risk assessment to effectively manage operational capabilities. In the context of Homeland Security Investigations, HSI, in the United States, this involves evaluating the potential impact of various threats and allocating resources to mitigate them. The scenario presents a challenge in quantifying the potential financial impact of a specific threat, requiring a data-driven approach to inform resource deployment. The professional challenge lies in translating abstract threat assessments into concrete financial projections that can guide budgetary decisions and operational priorities. This requires not only an understanding of potential threat scenarios, but also the ability to apply quantitative methods to estimate financial consequences, ensuring that HSI's limited resources are directed towards the most critical vulnerabilities. The best approach involves a systematic calculation of potential financial losses based on historical data and projected impact. This method directly addresses the need for a quantifiable risk assessment by using established formulas to estimate the expected financial loss. Specifically, it involves multiplying the probability of a specific threat occurring by the estimated financial impact if that threat materializes. This provides a clear, data-backed figure that can be used to prioritize mitigation efforts and justify resource allocation. This aligns with the principles of efficient and effective resource management, ensuring that HSI's efforts are focused on areas with the highest potential return on investment in terms of risk reduction. An approach that relies solely on qualitative assessments, without attempting to quantify the financial impact, fails to provide the necessary data for informed decision-making. While qualitative assessments are valuable for identifying threats, they do not offer a basis for comparing the relative financial risks of different scenarios or for justifying specific budget allocations. Another incorrect approach involves using arbitrary multipliers without a clear basis in data or established methodologies. This introduces subjectivity and reduces the reliability of the risk assessment, potentially leading to misallocation of resources. Finally, an approach that focuses only on the likelihood of a threat without considering its potential financial impact overlooks a critical component of risk assessment. As a low probability, high-impact event may pose a greater overall risk than a high-probability, low-impact event. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying and defining potential threats. This is followed by a rigorous assessment of the probability of each threat occurring and the potential financial impact if it does. The expected financial loss for each threat is then calculated using the formula: expected loss equals probability of threat times financial impact. This quantitative data allows for a comparative analysis of risks, enabling the prioritization of resources towards the threats with the highest expected financial loss, thereby optimizing the effectiveness of HSI's operations.